I'm Charles Faulhaber, professor of medieval Spanish literature and the former director of the Bancroft Library at the University of California, Berkeley. The PhiloBiblon project started in 1975 as an in-house database for the Dictionary of the Old Spanish Language project at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. The Dictionary of the Old Spanish Language was intended to be a citational lexicon, just like the Oxford English Dictionary is for English. The directors of the project, Lloyd Caston and his young colleague John Nitti, wanted to have a list of manuscripts written before 1500 as a basis of authentic material on which to base the dictionary. They realized early on that this list of pre-1500 manuscripts might also be interesting to other scholars. So they published a first edition with about 900 entries in 1975. It sold out in about 5 months. The second edition was published in 1977, and it contained around 1,800 entries, about twice as many as the first edition. In 1978, I started working on the catalog of the medieval manuscripts of the Hispanic Society of America in New York City. As I started working on that project, I was using the second edition of what was called Boost, Bibliography of Old Spanish Texts, as a reference work, and I realized that it was full of mistakes and simply omissions. Not surprising, since it was based primarily on secondary sources, not on first-hand inspection of the manuscripts themselves. So in 1981, I wrote to Professors Caston and Nitti a 10-page, single-spaced letter with a series of additions and corrections. No fools they. I got a letter back almost by return mail saying, well, if you know so much about all of this stuff, why don't you take the project on? So I did. The first edition that was published under my editorship was the third edition in 1984. It had about 3,300 entries. Again, most of them based on secondary sources, but increasingly those based on primary inspections, such as my own work in the Hispanic Society. PhiloBiblon today, in 2016, contains almost over 100 times as many entries, over 330,000, increasingly based on first-hand inspection of the manuscripts and early printed editions themselves. These are not just texts in medieval Spanish. In 1986, the Seminary of Medieval Spanish Studies at Wisconsin published the Bibliography of Old Catalan Texts that was compiled by an expatriate American scholar living in Barcelona, Beatriz Conchev. She passed on, and the project was taken over by Vicente Beltran and Gemma Albinosa from the University of Barcelona, who continue to lead it today. Roughly at the same time, in the around 1986 or 1987, my Berkeley colleague Arthur Askins became interested in the possibility of using our database technology for medieval Portuguese, Galician Portuguese, and Galician texts. And we said, absolutely. He was joined by a colleague from UC Santa Barbara, Harvey Scherer, and by his student, Martha Schaefer, at the University of San Francisco. The technology was changing. We started with a flat file database at the University of Wisconsin, and in 1987 realized that if we wanted to make data entry more efficient, we needed to use a relational database based on a PC system. And we did that. We moved to a database called Revelation Technology. Now the company is now Advanced Revelation. And we have been using the same technology and the same programmer, John May, since 1987. At the time, we were still thinking of doing primarily print catalogs of the various databases. That was the only reasonable way to disseminate this material. But one of the problems with a print version of a database is that as soon as it's published, it's out of date. As soon as you add another record, you need another edition. So we started exploring the possibility. What would the possibilities be? Well, CD-ROM discs were becoming available in the late 1980s for music and increasingly for data. We thought that if we were extremely fortunate, we might be able to release PhiloBiblon on CD-ROM by the year 2000. Serendipity comes into effect. I had met Francisco Marcos Marin from the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid at the 1986 Berlin conference of the Asociación Internacional de Hispanistas, and we had become friends. Paco was appointed as the director of the Área de Industrias de la Lengua en la Sociedad Estatal Quinto Centenario. This was Spain's government corporation to prepare for the 1992 500th anniversary celebrations of the what in the politically correct called the encounter of two cultures. And I will leave it at that. The project that came out of the Quinto Centenario was called ADMITE, Archivo Digital de Textos y Manuscritos Españoles. It included digital facsimiles of about 50 early printed texts from 1482 to 1520, along with transcriptions. It was the first project that matched digital image and electronic text. And at the same time, it published the first edition of PhiloBiblon with what were then the three bibliographies. Boost, now longer called Bibliography of Old Spanish Texts, was now Beta, Bibliografía Española de Textos Antiguos. Booked became Biteca, Bibliografía de Textos Antics, Bibliografía de Textos Catalans Antics, and there had been no earlier print edition of the Portuguese material, and that was called BITEGAP, Bibliografía de Textos Antiguos Galegos y Portugueses. That disc was published in Spain by a consortium led by the Biblioteca Nacional de Quinto Centenario and the company Micronet. In 1994, the World Wide Web became a possibility to disseminate such information. We made the first internet version of PhiloBiblon available in 1997, based at the Bancroft Library at the University of California in Berkeley. It was a pioneering effort. It led much to be desired, but it did allow us to make these materials available and update the databases on a regular basis every quarter, more or less. Since 1997, we've had two major updates of the Internet system, both of them funded primarily by the National Endowment for the Humanities in the United States. The first new version came out in 2011, and we have just released in June of 2016 the second, the third now, internet version of PhiloBiblon with a much cleaner interface and some additional functionality. Where we go from here is not clear. From the time PhiloBiblon started, from the time it was the database of Boost in 1975 until about 5 years ago, it was still cutting edge technology, state-of-the-art technology. What's happened over the past 10 years or so is that the internet has become increasingly more sophisticated, and what is now called the semantic web The third internet, www3, is becoming available. The first internet was the one that started roughly in 1994. Internet 2 was the social media internet. It's with Facebook and Twitter and all of the other programs which allow people to keep in contact. Internet 3 is a semantic web where all of the various things that can be connected on the internet will have essentially unique identifiers, just like URLs for links between various programs and web pages. This is going to require a fairly substantial rewrite of the current technology. Right now what we do is export from the PC-based versions of the three databases complete copies of the various tables, manuscripts and editions, works, individuals, secondary bibliography. These are then uploaded to a program at UC Berkeley, and the individual files are split down into their component records, and then these are indexed and made available on the web. We now have a mirror site at the Universitat Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona, which takes the same materials and does exactly the same thing. This makes it possible for people in Spain to, in Europe, generally to get quicker access to these materials. Whether this is going to take a fairly large amount of money. The project, because the individuals who have been running it since the beginning, like myself, Arthur Askins, Vicente Beltran, Javi Shar, we're now retired, and we need to pass this on to younger hands, and we have to move it from the United States to Spain, to the Iberian Peninsula, which is where it should be. So we now have a potential home for it in the Universitat Pompeu Fabra, but we now need to get funding in order to make the changes in the web software and the technology itself. Y esto es donde estamos en estos momentos. Yo, claro, después de 35 años dirigiendo este proyecto, rompiéndome la cabeza cada 5 o 7 años para buscar dinero para la tecnología, yo lo que quiero hacer es devolverlo como digo, a las manos más jóvenes, para que yo me pueda dedicar a la cosa que más me interesa, que es estudiar los manuscritos in situ en España. Y claro, esto me daría una excusa excelente para decirle a mi mujer que me deje ir a España de vez en cuando para sentarme en la Biblioteca Nacional, en el Escorial, en la Biblioteca de Palacio, para estudiar los manuscritos. Y nada más.